If someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd be here, penning this story, I would have dismissed it with a laugh. Back then, everything seemed secure, my marriage felt stable, my job was solid, and our home brought comfort. I wasn't the kind of man who stayed up at night wondering if his wife might drift away or if his world could crumble in an instant. But life, as it often does, has a cruel way of humbling you, sweeping the ground out from under just as you begin to believe it's steady beneath your feet. Rachel wasn't just my wife, she was my closest confidant. Or at least, that's what I believed for many years. We shared over 10 years together, navigating life's ups and downs, working side by side to create a bond one thought could withstand any storm. We had met during our college years, fell in love quickly, and married before we truly had the time or wisdom to figure out what we truly needed from life. Maybe that was where we stumbled first, putting our faith in the idea that love, by itself, could be enough. For a long while, I didn't see the red flags. Or maybe, deep down, I just chose not to see them. It felt simpler to believe that everything was fine than to confront the unsettling truth that something was shifting between us. Her late nights became more frequent. Her eyes stopped meeting mine the way they used to, and a sudden yearning for independence began to stir within her. It didn't hit all at once. It crept in slowly, like a storm building far off in the distance. Then came the night when everything changed. We were sitting in our kitchen, and she looked across the table with an unnerving calm and said she needed space. Her tone was so casual, it could have been mistaken for a comment about the grocery list. I stared at her, confused and trying to dismiss the gnawing feeling in my stomach. Space? I echoed, unsure of what she was really saying. She exhaled slowly and tucked her hair behind her ear, her expression distant and patient, like she was explaining something obvious to a child. She told me she felt confined, like she hadn't truly experienced life for herself. She needed to find her own path, explore her freedom, and her options. I felt the air rush from my lungs. Options? That word hit like a punch. It implied there were other choices, other people on her mind. I should have felt anger, demanded clarity, pleaded with her to stay, or expressed my hurt. But instead, I sat frozen, numb, staring at this woman I thought I knew so well, slowly realizing that perhaps I never really knew her at all. That same night, she packed her things. There were no tears, no second thoughts. She kissed me gently on the cheek, like a friend saying goodbye after a casual meetup, and then walked out the door into what she clearly saw as a new chapter. I remained seated for hours, staring at the spot she had vacated, questioning how someone could just decide one morning that the life they had built was no longer enough. But here's the truth about chasing freedom. It rarely looks the way you expect it to. And Rachel? She was about to face that lesson in a very real way. The first evening on my own was unbearable. I sat on the couch in silence, not even bothering to turn on the television. The house, once filled with the sound of her voice and the warmth of her laughter, now echoed with silence. It felt like a wound left wide open. I tried to reassure myself that this was temporary, that she'd come to her senses and return within a few days. I didn't touch her side of the bed, clinging to the hope that she'd slip under the covers again and tell me it had all been a huge misunderstanding. But time moved forward. Days became weeks, and she didn't return. I wasn't in denial. I knew what space really meant. She wasn't out there finding herself through quiet walks and deep meditation. No, she was with someone else, perhaps more than one. The very thought of it twisted my insides, but I refused to fall apart. I poured myself into work, kept myself occupied, and pretended I wasn't a man left behind by the woman he loved. Then the phone calls began. At first, they were light-hearted check-ins. Rachel would call now and then, speaking to me like we were old friends instead of a couple torn apart. She'd ask about my work, make small talk about things like household repairs, as though everything was normal. I played along. I never pressed her about where she was staying or who she was spending time with. I told myself that none of it mattered anymore. But one night, something shifted in her voice during the call. There was hesitation, a nervous energy I hadn't heard before. Eventually, she said it, softly, but clearly. She told me she was seeing someone. I gripped the phone so tightly my fingers ached, trying to steady my voice even as my whole body tensed. So there it was, spoken out loud. The truth I had known deep down. That was fast, I managed, keeping my tone even though my emotions were raging inside. She laughed lightly, and the sound sent a cold chill through me. It just happened, she said, like it was nothing, like it wasn't the unraveling of everything we once had. I swallowed hard. Right. Just happened. Then came the silence, that long, uncomfortable pause that reveals more than words ever could. In that moment, I understood. The person on the other end of the line wasn't mine anymore. I just wanted to be honest with you, she said eventually. Honest? That word nearly made me laugh. Where had all this honesty been hiding when she was secretly detaching herself from our relationship, emotionally distancing herself long before she ever packed her things? But I didn't bring any of that up. Instead, I simply replied, "Thanks for letting me know," and ended the call before she had the chance to say more. I sat there, staring at my phone, my pulse racing and my stomach in a tight knot. I had assumed that moment, hearing her say she had moved on, would be the most painful part. I couldn't have been more wrong. What came after shifted everything. I wish I could say I immediately turned the page. That I woke up the next morning with a sense of clarity, laced up my running shoes, hit the gym, and kicked off a fresh chapter in my life, just like some motivational book would suggest. But real life doesn't work that way. Not when you've shared over 10 years with someone, creating a life that was once intertwined in every possible way. Not when your entire home feels like a gallery of memories, every corner, every scent, every item whispering their name. From the coffee mugs we used to share to the scent of her perfume lingering in the closet, everything reminded me of her. Instead of thriving, I unraveled quietly and without fanfare. I kept convincing myself that I was managing, but the truth was, I was barely holding on. At work, I drifted through meetings, nodded at conversations I didn't really hear, and came back each night to a house that echoed with the silence of what used to be. Worst of all, Rachel's words replayed in my head on a loop. I just wanted to be honest with you. As if her sudden burst of transparency could somehow erase everything she had already done. Like calling to tell me she had found someone else was supposed to be a noble gesture. Pain, however, has a unique way of pulling you down until something finally breaks. For me, that breaking point arrived one Friday night. I was sitting in the dark, phone in hand, scrolling through photos from the past. Each one was a reminder of what we had been. Our honeymoon in Hawaii. The first Christmas we spent together. Cozy Sundays when she'd lie on my chest and absent-mindedly trace circles on my skin. And I couldn't stop asking myself, had any of it been real? On impulse, I opened her social media page. Maybe I was hoping to find some kind of regret in her posts, a sign that she missed me. Or maybe I just needed closure. What I saw, though, hit harder than I'd imagined. There she was, Rachel, my wife, the woman who had claimed she needed time alone, now standing in a dim rooftop bar, wrapped in the arms of another man. And he wasn't just anyone. He was younger, flashy, the type who wore luxury watches and grinned like he'd never known a rough day. And Rachel? She looked more than happy, she was glowing. She didn't seem heartbroken or lost. She looked like she had already started a new life. That was the moment it really sank in. She hadn't left to find herself. She had been laying the groundwork for this new chapter long before she ever walked out our door. While I clung to the remnants of what we once had, she had already moved forward. Something deep inside me cracked. I refused to be the man left behind, the one everyone felt sorry for. That night, I made a decision. I reclaimed my power. I began by wiping my phone clean of every single photo of her. Every smile, every memory gone. I gathered all her remaining belongings into a box and placed it by the front door. Then, for the first time since she had gone, I stepped into our bedroom, yanked off the sheets that still held traces of her, and tossed them straight into the trash. It wasn't just about cleanliness. It was symbolic. A signal to myself that I was ready to move forward, ready to stop living in the shadow of what used to be. But what I didn't realize then was that, while I was doing everything I could to close the chapter on Rachel, she was about to step back into my story uninvited. And when she did, everything shifted once again. It had been 8 weeks since Rachel had walked away. 8 weeks of no contact. Of nights spent alone. Of me trying to convince myself that the woman I had once shared my life with had let me go like a story she no longer wanted to finish. Despite all the introspection, the effort to rebuild what she had left shattered. Nothing could have prepared me for what came next. It was a typical Sunday afternoon. I had just returned from a workout, trying to stick to a new routine to keep my mind occupied. Sweat clung to my body as I stepped into the house and slipped off my sneakers by the front door. And then, I saw her, Rachel, standing in the kitchen, as if no time had passed, as if she had never left at all. For a split second, I thought I was imagining her. Maybe I had pushed too hard at the gym. Maybe this was just a fatigue-induced illusion. But it wasn't. There she was, wearing my old gray sweater, the one she used to borrow whenever she was cold. Her blonde hair was pulled up in a messy bun, and her face held an unreadable expression as she looked at me. My jaw clenched instinctively. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice low. She looked genuinely hurt. I used my key, she said, like that explained everything. You don't live here anymore, I said sharply. She flinched slightly. It was subtle, but I saw it, and for the first time, I realized something wasn't right. She no longer resembled the lively, carefree woman from those curated images on social media. There were deep shadows under her eyes. Her skin looked dull and tired, and as she nervously played with the hem of her sweater, I noticed her nails, usually flawless, were chipped and uneven. Can we talk? She asked. I let out a sharp breath, my fingers running through damp strands of hair. The audacity. She had left me, claiming she needed time and space, only to flaunt a brand new relationship online for everyone to see. And now she was standing here, asking to talk? I should have slammed the door. I should have told her that she had made her choices and now had to live with them. But instead, curiosity won. All right, I said. Go ahead. Rachel hesitated. Her eyes dropped to the floor as though she was searching for the right words. Eventually, she whispered, I made a mistake. I waited silently, arms folded. When I walked away, I really believed it was the right move. I thought I needed a clean slate, some kind of freedom, something new. Her voice wavered as she spoke, and she swallowed hard before continuing. But it turned out differently than I imagined. My arms remained crossed. Is that so? She nodded slowly. At first, everything felt exciting. The attention, the change. But then reality kicked in. The man I left with, he wasn't who I thought he was. He made a lot of promises, but didn't keep them. And when life got tough, when I really needed someone, he disappeared. I almost laughed at the irony. She had abandoned a committed marriage, a loyal partner, chasing a fantasy. And now that the illusion had crumbled, she wanted to come back. What are you hoping to get from me, Rachel? I asked, keeping my tone calm. Her lower lip quivered. I miss you. I stared at her, taking in the face I once loved deeply, the same face that had broken my heart. But now, something had shifted. For the first time since she walked out, I realized I didn't feel shattered anymore. I wasn't craving her attention or affection. In fact, I felt nothing. She must have seen it in my expression, because panic flickered across her face. I know I hurt you, she said quickly, stepping closer. But I want to make it right. I want to come back. Her words should have ignited something in me. But all they stirred was an odd, almost calming sense of closure. You can't, I said plainly. Rachel blinked, clearly caught off guard. What? You don't live here anymore, I repeated, this time with an edge of finality. Her eyes welled up, but I didn't budge. I was no longer the person she had walked away from. I had evolved. And the life she had abandoned? It had moved on without her. She turned slowly, brushing away her tears as she headed for the door. Before stepping out, she looked over her shoulder one last time. I really did love you, she murmured. I met her gaze. I used to love you too. And with that, she left. This time, it felt like it was truly the end. What I couldn't have known was that Rachel's remorse was only just beginning. The moment the door clicked shut behind her for the second time, I braced myself for an emotional wave, grief, fury, maybe even a touch of relief. But none of those came. Instead, I was met with a peculiar feeling of closure, like turning the last page of a novel I should have put down a long time ago. She had made her decision, and now I had made mine. Life didn't transform overnight, but something inside me began to shift. For the first time in years, I started pouring my energy into myself. I rekindled friendships that had faded, took on more responsibilities at work, and explored something new. Hiking. It had always been on my list, but Rachel had never shared my enthusiasm for it. At first, it felt unfamiliar. I was so used to making choices with someone else in mind that doing things for myself seemed strange. But with each passing week, it started to feel more natural. I began waking up early, driving out to distant trails, and just walking. No calls, no stress, no reminders of the past. Just me, the open trail, and a peace I hadn't known in years. Then, just as I started to believe I had left Rachel in the rearview mirror, she found a way to reappear. It began subtly with short messages. At first, they seemed harmless. Hey, just checking in. Hope everything's good. I didn't respond. A few days later, I saw you started hiking. You used to talk about that all the time. It's great that you're doing it now. Again, I ignored it. Then came the phone calls. I let them go to voicemail, but after missing the fourth call in a single day, I finally answered. What is it? Rachel? I asked, keeping my tone calm. There was a pause. I miss talking to you. I let out a breath. We don't need to talk anymore. I know, she replied quickly. I get that. I don't know how to explain it. I thought I was doing the right thing. But now, every time I think about the future, I can't imagine it without you. I rubbed my forehead. Rachel, you walked away. You were the one who wanted distance, freedom. Well, now you've got it. Enjoy what you chose. She was silent for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. I was wrong. I could hear the emotion laced in her voice, raw and unfiltered. Once upon a time, that kind of vulnerability would have shaken me. But now, it didn't move me like it used to. I honestly don't know how you expect me to respond to that, I admitted quietly. She let out a soft sniffle. Yeah, I don't know either. I don't want to lose you for good. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. Rachel, that already happened. That should have been where everything ended. But regret has a stubborn way of lingering. Rachel wasn't ready to accept that she had already lost me. And soon, she'd go to great lengths to try and change that. Weeks went by, but Rachel's messages never stopped. If anything, they came in more often. I ignored her texts, rejected her calls, made it abundantly clear that there was nothing left for her in the past she kept trying to revisit. But strangely, being ignored only seemed to light a fire under her. One evening, after returning from a long hike, my body pleasantly sore, my thoughts calm, I tossed my phone onto the kitchen counter, already expecting another message. But this one wasn't like the others. No casual, hey, or another trip down memory lane. This was different. A full paragraph lit up the screen. Rachel, I need to talk to you. Please. This is important. I know I messed up, and I probably don't deserve even a second of your time. But I need to see you. Just once. If you ever truly loved me, if you ever cared, please, just give me this one conversation. I let out a long breath. Now she was playing on guilt. And truthfully, I had loved her, deeply, completely. But loving someone doesn't mean you give them permission to hurt you over and over. Real love doesn't mean letting someone break you down, only to crawl back when the thrill of the unknown wears off. Still, even after everything, part of me was curious. Against better judgment, I typed a short reply. One conversation. That's it. Her answer came almost immediately. Rachel, thank you. Tomorrow? 7 in the evening? The coffee shop near our old place. I paused for a second, then responded with a simple, fine. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in months. Not because I was looking forward to seeing her, but because I finally felt like I was in control, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. The next evening, I stepped into the familiar coffee shop, half expecting to see the woman I had once loved. The one who had walked away so easily. But the person sitting in the far corner wasn't that Rachel. Her hair was pulled up in a careless bun that looked more like exhaustion than fashion. She wore no makeup, and faint shadows under her eyes hinted at many sleepless nights. Her hands nervously stirred her drink, fingers twitching, something she only did when anxiety took over. I sat down across from her, keeping my tone flat. All right. Say what you need to say. She swallowed, clearly unsure of how to begin. Then, she inhaled deeply and said, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I leaned back, arms crossed. That's not the first time you've said that. She flinched, visibly hurt, but pressed on. I mean it this time. Truly. I thought leaving was the right move. I believed it would bring me happiness. And at first, I did feel free, like a whole new world had opened up for me. I remained silent, letting her continue. Her voice trembled as she went on. The guy I left you for? He wasn't real, not in the way I imagined. He was more in love with the idea of me than the actual me. The moment things became complicated, when I stopped being that carefree version of myself, he checked out. I raised an eyebrow. So, he ended things? Her eyes filled with pain. Not exactly. He was unfaithful. I stared at her, stunned for a moment by the cruel irony. She let out a dry laugh. Yeah, karma, right? But I didn't feel sympathy. There was a time when her pain would have gutted me. But now? I felt oddly detached, like a stranger listening to someone else's regrets. She reached across the table, fingertips just grazing mine. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think you care anymore. I just needed you to know. I regret everything. Leaving you, hurting you, all of it. If I could undo it, I would. I pulled my hand away. But you can't. Tears welled up in her eyes. I know. I stood, placing some cash on the table to cover my drink. Take care, Rachel. She looked up, a flicker of desperation in her gaze. Is there really no chance left? Not even the smallest one? I didn't need to think. No. And with that, I walked out. The evening air was cool against my skin as I stepped outside, and something inside me shifted. That moment wasn't just the closure of my story with Rachel, it marked the beginning of a new chapter. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe freely again. I thought that was the last of it. That Rachel's confession at the coffee shop was the final act in this twisted play. I had walked away from her that day, leaving her to sit with the weight of her own regrets. And this time, I had truly moved forward with my life. But regret isn't something that simply vanishes. And as for Rachel, she wasn't finished. Not yet. About a week after our last conversation, small things began catching my attention. Initially, they seemed trivial, easily brushed off. A missed call from an unfamiliar number. A car idling near my house that seemed oddly familiar. That uneasy feeling crept back, the kind that made the hairs on my neck stand up, the sense of being watched. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to nerves or imagination. But soon after, messages started trickling in from our mutual friends. Hey, I saw Rachel the other day, she asked about you a lot. Is everything all right? Rachel's been off lately. Keeps bringing up your name, asking if you're dating anyone. Then one evening, I came home to find her sitting there, curled up on my front steps, arms wrapped around her knees, her face pale and drawn with exhaustion. I froze for a moment, tempted to turn the car around and drive anywhere else just to avoid what was coming. But I wasn't going to give her the impression that she could just show up whenever she pleased. I parked the car, stepped out, and stood firmly with my arms crossed. Rachel, what are you doing here? She lifted her head slowly, eyes glossy with unshed tears. I didn't know where else to go. I let out a sigh. That's not something I can help you with. Her face tightened, as if the words physically pained her. I know I don't have the right to be here. But I don't know how to move on. I clenched my jaw. That's not on me, I said again, more firmly this time as I turned toward the door. Behind me, I heard her scramble to her feet. Wait, please. I paused but didn't face her. I made a mistake, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. I had something real, something stable, and I ruined it for nothing. My breath came out slow, controlled. I'm not going to keep revisiting this, Rachel. She swallowed, her voice trembling. Are you seeing anyone? A dry laugh escaped me. That's not your concern. She blinked, trying to hold back the emotion building in her eyes. I hate the idea of you being with someone else. This time, I turned to face her directly. You don't get to feel that way anymore. Not now. She wrapped her arms around herself, nodding slowly. I know, but knowing doesn't make the feeling go away. I ran a hand through my hair in frustration. What do you want from me, Rachel? There was a pause before she responded. A second chance. I studied her for a long moment. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the same person I had once loved. And I knew I wasn't the same man she had walked away from. I can't give you that, I said firmly. You made a decision. You wanted to be free. No, I want that too. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. So that's it. I nodded. Yes, that's it. She lingered for a moment, her eyes searching mine, then finally took a step back. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't look away. So am I. She turned and walked off into the night. This time, it felt final. As she disappeared down the street, I felt something shift inside me, something deep. Closure. For the first time since this ordeal began, I truly felt released. After Rachel left that evening, I stood on my porch for a long while. The quiet around me felt heavy, but not in a painful way. I watched the street, empty and still, and listened to the soft sounds of the world around me. And for the first time in a very long while, I wasn't waiting. I wasn't holding on to some fading hope that she might return or that things might go back to how they once were. It was done. Entirely and finally done. And that realization brought peace. When I woke the next morning, something felt different. Not like in a movie where everything changes overnight, but there was a calmness, something steady and real. Grief has a way of making you think the world has stopped turning, that nothing exists beyond it. But then one day, the fog lifts just a little, and you see that the sun still rises, life continues, and you're still standing. Maybe you've changed. Maybe you carry a few more emotional bruises. But you're still here. And I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was ready to live. I leaned into my new life. Work wasn't just a way to pass time anymore. I actually began to enjoy it. I took short road trips, nothing extravagant, just destinations I had always told myself I'd visit someday. I even adopted a dog, something Rachel and I had talked about for years but never acted on. And honestly, having that kind of joyful presence in my life changed everything. I started reconnecting with old friends, people I had unintentionally distanced myself from during the worst of it. These were the people who had always been there for me, and it felt good to rebuild those bridges. Somewhere along the way, I met someone new. Her name was Olivia. She wasn't anything like Rachel. She didn't try to sweep me off my feet or make bold, sweeping declarations. She was calm, honest, and grounded. We met in the most unexpected place, a bookstore. She had been struggling to grab a book from a high shelf, and I happened to be tall enough to reach it for her. One conversation led to another, which turned into coffee, then into something that felt effortless. Natural. I didn't rush things. I wasn't on a rebound mission or trying to replace what I had lost. As the months rolled by, it became clear to me that Olivia wasn't just a pleasant companion. I was drawn to her in a way that made me want to improve, to grow into someone better. Being with her didn't just bring comfort, it sparked hope for what lay ahead, rather than anchoring me in memories of what had been. One quiet evening, we sat side by side on my porch, watching the sky shift into the soft colors of dusk. She turned to me and asked, "Do you still think about her?" There was no confusion about whom she meant. I paused, took in a slow breath, and gently shook my head. "Not the way I used to," I said. Her smile in response was warm, and she leaned her head against my shoulder. "That's good," she whispered. And it truly was. Because Rachel had once been a major part of my life, a long and difficult chapter. Yes, but only a chapter. That part of the story had ended. Now, I was beginning a new one. This time, it wasn't shaped by sorrow or lingering pain. Instead, it was defined by healing, by contentment, and by the peace that comes with moving ahead without the weight of the past. I had known love. I had endured loss. But in the end, I had grown stronger than I ever imagined possible. Rachel had made her choice to embrace her own path, and I, finally, had discovered mine.